Hello and welcome to the Yellow Chair Classroom. Now we are proceeding with the second part. I hope you would have really enjoyed the first part of the fantastic Mr. Fox. A small recap of part 1 I would like to tell to refresh your memories. Mr. Fox steals food from the farmers, Bean, Bogus and Buns. They try to shoot him, but to their utter disappointment, they only get his tail. Mr. Fox digs tunnels underground and finds secret passages to the farm to get food. The descriptive writing and the illustration gives a feel as if it's real. Roald Dahl, the author, has made the story so interesting that it gets even more exciting with all clever plans and plots the fox makes. Come on quickly, we'll dive into the story. We can't wait any longer. For 3 days and 3 nights, this waiting game went on. How long can a fox go without food or water? Bogus asked on the 3rd day. Not much longer now, Bean told him. He'll make a run for it soon. He'll have to. Bean was right. Down in the tunnel, the foxes were slowly but surely starving to death. If only we could have just a tiny sip of water, said one of the small foxes. Oh, Dad, can't you do something? Couldn't we make a dash for it, Dad? We'd have a little bit of chance, wouldn't we? No chance at all, snapped Mrs. Fox. I refuse to let you go up there and face those guns. I'd sooner you stay down here and die in peace. Mr. Fox had not spoken for a long time. He had been sitting quite still, his eyes closed, not even hearing what the others were saying. Mrs. Fox knew that he was trying desperately to think of a way out. And now, as she looked at him, she saw him stir himself and get slowly to his feet. He looked up at his wife. There was a little spark of excitement and dancing in his eyes. What is it, darling? Said Mrs. Fox quickly. I've just had a bit of an idea, Mr. Fox said carefully. What? They cried. Oh, Dad, what is it? Come on, said Mrs. Fox. Tell us quickly. Well, said Mr. Fox. Then he stopped and sighed and sadly shook his head. He sat down again. It's no good, he said. It won't work after all. Why not, Dad? Because it means more digging, and we aren't any of us strong enough for that after 3 days and nights without food. Yes, we are, Dad, cried the small foxes, jumping up and running to their father. We can do it. You see, if we can't, so can you. Mr. Fox looked at the 4 small foxes and he smiled. What fine children I have, he thought. They are starving to death and they haven't had a drink for 3 days, but they are still undefeated. I must not let them down. I suppose we could give it a try, he said. Let's go, Dad. Tell us what you want us to do. Slowly, Mrs. Fox got to her feet. She was suffering more than any of them from the lack of food and water. She was very weak. I'm so sorry, she said, but I don't think I'm going to be much help. You stay right there where you are, my darling, said Mr. Fox. We can handle this by ourselves. This time, we must go in a very special direction, said Mr. Fox, pointing sideways and downwards. So he and his 4 children started to dig once again. The work went much more slowly now, yet they kept at it with great courage, and little by little the tunnel began to grow. "Dad, I wish you would tell us where we are going," said one of the children. "I dare not do that," said Mr. Fox, "because this place I'm hoping to get to is so marvelous that if I described it to you, you would go crazy with excitement. And then, if we failed to get there, which is very possible, you would die of disappointment. I don't want to raise your hopes too much, my darlings." For a long time they kept on digging. For how long they did not know, because there were no days and no nights down there in the mucky tunnel. But at last Mr. Fox gave the order to stop. "I think," he said, "we had better take a peep upstairs now and see where we are. I know where I want to be, but I can't possibly be sure we are anywhere near it." Slowly, wearily, the foxes began to slope the tunnel up towards the surface. Up and up it went, until suddenly they came to something hard above their heads, and they couldn't go up any further. Mr. Fox reached up to examine this hard thing. "It's wood," he whispered. "Wooden planks." "What does that mean, Dad?" "It means, unless I am very much mistaken, that we are right underneath somebody's house," whispered Mr. Fox. "Be very quiet now while I take a peek." Carefully, Mr. Fox began pushing one of the floorboards. The boards creaked most terribly, and they all ducked down, waiting for something awful to happen. Nothing did. So Mr. Fox pushed up a second board, and then, very, very cautiously, he poked his head up through the gap. He let out a shriek of excitement. "I've done it!" he yelled. "I've done it first time. I've done it." He pulled himself up through the gap in the floor and started prancing and dancing with joy. "Come on up," he sang out. "Come up and see where you are, my darlings." What a sight for a hungry fox! Hallelujah! Hooray! Hooray! The 4 small foxes scrambled up out of the tunnel, and what a fantastic sight it was that now met their eyes. They were in a huge shed, and the whole place was teeming with chickens. They were white chickens and brown chickens and black chickens by the 1,000. "Bogus chicken house number 1, cried Mr. Fox. "It's exactly what I was aiming at. I hit it slap in the middle. First time. Isn't that fantastic? And, if I may say so, rather clever." The small foxes went wild with excitement. They started running around all directions, chasing the stupid chickens. "Wait," ordered Mr. Fox. "Don't lose your heads. Stand back. Calm down. Let's do this properly. First of all, everyone have a drink of water." They all ran over to the chickens' drinking trough and lapped up the lovely, cool water. Then Mr. Fox chose 3 of the plumpest hens, and with a clever flick of his jaws, he killed them instantly. Back to the tunnel, he ordered. No fooling around. The quicker you move, the quicker you shall have something to eat. One after another, they climbed down through the hole in the floor, and soon they were all standing once again in the dark tunnel. Mr. Fox reached up and pulled the floorboards back into the place. He did this with great care. He did it so that no one could tell they had ever been moved. "My son," he said, giving the 3 plump hens to the biggest of his 4 small children, "run back with those to your mother. Tell her to prepare a feast. Tell her the rest of us will be along in a jiffy, as soon as we have made a few other little arrangements." The small fox ran back along the tunnel as fast as he could, carrying the 3 plump hens. He was exploding with joy. "Just wait," he kept thinking. "Just wait till Mummy sees this." He had a long way to run, but he never stopped once on the way, and he came bursting in upon Mrs. Fox. "Mummy!" he cried out of breath. "Look, Mummy, look! Wake up and see what I have brought you." Mrs. Fox, who was weaker than ever, now from lack of food, opened one eye and looked at the hens. "I'm dreaming," she murmured, and closed the eye again. "You're not dreaming, Mummy. They are real chickens. We are saved. We are not going to starve." Mrs. Fox opened both eyes and sat up quickly. "But my dear child," she cried, "where on earth?" "Bogus chicken house number 1, spluttered the small fox. "We tunneled right up under the floor, and you have never seen so many big fat hens in all your life. And Dad said to prepare a feast. They'll be back soon." The sight of food seemed to give new strength to Mrs. Fox. "A feast it shall be," she said, standing up. "Oh, what a fantastic fox your father is. Hurry up, child, and start plucking those chickens." Far away down in the tunnel, the fantastic Mr. Fox was saying, "Now for the next bit, my darlings. This one will be as easy as pie. All we have to do is dig another little tunnel from here to there." "To where, Dad?" "Don't ask so many questions. Start digging." Mr. Fox and the 3 remaining small foxes dug fast and straight. They were all too excited now to feel tired or hungry. They knew they were going to have a whacking great feast before long, and the fact that it was none other than bogus chickens they were going to eat made them churgle with laughter every time they thought of it. It was lovely to realize that while the fat farmer was sitting up there on the hill waiting for them to starve, he was also giving them their dinner without knowing it. "Keep digging," said Mr. Fox. "It's not much further." All of a sudden, a deep voice above their heads said, "Who goes there?" The foxes jumped. They looked up quickly and they saw, peeking through a small hole in the roof of the tunnel, a long, black, pointed, furry face. "Badger!" cried Mr. Fox. "Foxy!" cried Badger. My goodness me, I am glad I have found someone at last. I have been digging around in circles for 3 days and nights and I haven't the foggiest idea where I am. Badger made the hole in the ceiling bigger and dropped down beside the foxes. A small badger, his son, dropped down after him. Haven't you heard what's happening up on the hill? Badger said excitedly. It's chaos. Half the wood has disappeared and there are men with guns all over the countryside. None of us can get out, even at night. We all are starving to death. Who is we? Asked Mr. Fox. All us diggers. That's me and Mole and Rabbit and all our wives and children. Even Weasel, who can usually sneak out of the tightest spots, is right now hiding down my hole with Mrs. Weasel and 6 kids. What on earth are we going to do, Foxy? I think we are finished. Mr. Fox looked at his 3 children and he smiled. The children smiled back at him, sharing this secret. My dear old Badger, he said, this mess you are in is all my fault. I know it's your fault, said Badger furiously, and the farmers are not going to give up till they have got you. Unfortunately, that means us as well. It means everyone on the hill. Badger sat down and put a paw around his small son. We are done for, he said softly. My poor wife up there is so weak she can't dig another yard. Nor can mine, said Mr. Fox. And yet, at this very minute, she is preparing for me and my children the most delicious feast of plump, juicy chickens. Stop, cried Badger. Don't tease me, I can't stand it. It's true, cried the small foxes. That's not teasing. We have got chickens galore. And because everything is entirely my fault, said Mr. Fox, I invite you to share the feast. I invite everyone to share it. You and Mole and Rabbit and Weasel and all your wives and children. There will be plenty to go around, I can assure you. You mean it? Cried Badger. You really mean it? Mr. Fox pushed his face close to Badger's and whispered darkly, Do you know where we have just been? Where? Right inside Bogus Chicken House number 1. No. Yes, but that is nothing to where we are going now. You have come just at the right moment, my dear Badger. You can help us dig, and in the meanwhile, your small son can run back to Mrs. Badger and all the others and spread the good news. Mr. Fox turned to the small badger and said, Tell them they are invited to a fox's feast. Then bring them all down here and follow the tunnel back until you find my home. Yes, Mr. Fox, said the small badger. Yes, sir, right away, sir. Oh, thank you, sir. And he scrambled quickly back through the hole in the roof of the tunnel and disappeared.